Welcome to Mr. Beebop. The Big Four is a work of detective fiction by Agatha Christie, first published in the UK by William Collins and Sons on January 27, 1927, and in the US by Dodd, Mead and Company, later in the same year. It features Hercule Poirot, Arthur Hastings, and Inspector Japp. Here are some interesting facts and trivia about the novel. In 1926, Christie was already deeply affected by the death of her mother earlier in the year, and the breakdown of her marriage to Archibald Christie. Her brother-in-law, Campbell Christie, suggested that, rather than undergo the strain of composing a completely new novel, Christie should merely compile her most recent series of Poirot stories into a full-length book. And so the structure of the novel is different from other Poirot stories, in that it began from 12 short stories, 11 in the US, that had been separately published in 1924. Campbell helped her revise the stories, which had been written for Sketch magazine, into a more coherent form for book publication. His assistants mainly took the form of revising the beginnings and ends of the stories, to make them flow better into a novel. The substance of each story remains the same between the short story version and the novel version. This is a tale of international intrigue and espionage, therefore opening up the possibility of more spy fiction from Christie. Captain Hastings returns to England after 18 months in Argentina, only to find his old friend Hercule Poirot about to leave himself for South America. However, an unexpected visitor comes in, framed in the doorway of Poirot's bedroom, coated from head to foot in dust. The man's gaunt face stared for a moment, then he swayed and dramatically collapsed on the floor. Who was he? Was he suffering from shock or just exhaustion? The only clue to what he wants is his saying Poirot's name, his only words. Above all, what was the significance of the figure 4, scribbled over and over again on a sheet of paper? Poirot finds himself plunged into a world of international intrigue, risking his life to uncover the truth about number 4. Hercule Poirot, the famous private investigator. Having tired of his life in England and dealing with trivial matters, he is tempted to move to Brazil. He has received a monetary offer too good to refuse. Arthur Hastings, Poirot's sidekick in 2 earlier novels and 2 short stories. He briefly works as a secretary of Abe Ryland under the alias Arthur Neville. Inspector Japp. He is an inspector of Scotland Yard. Abe Ryland, the so-called American soap king. He is stated to be richer than John D. Rockefeller and being the richest man in the world. Madame Olivier, a French woman scientist. She is stated to be a famous nuclear physicist and analytical chemist. Li Changyen, the Chinese leader and mastermind of the group, said to have the finest criminal brain ever known. He is an unseen character who never sets foot out of China, but is discussed often by other characters. Claude Darrell, known as the Destroyer. He is an obscure English actor and a master of disguise. He appears with ever-changing faces and multiple identities throughout the novel. He can totally transform his physical appearance and his persona. Hercule Poirot, Hercule's supposed twin brother. Hercule lacks a mustache and is described by Hercule as being less handsome. Hercule is later revealed to be Hercule Poirot himself in disguise. Countess Vera Rosikoff. A flamboyant, eccentric, and devious Russian aristocrat who currently has no personal fortune. She is employed as a secretary by Madame Olivier under the alias Inès Verneau. She is both a friend and an adversary to Poirot. Joseph Aarons. A theatrical agent who helps Poirot identify actor Claude Darrell. John Halliday. A scientist who visited Paris for a conference and disappeared. John Ingalls. A retired civil servant of reportedly mediocre intellect. He is an expert on China and all things Chinese. Mr. Mayerling. A former member of the Secret Service and a victim of the Big Four. He dies in Poirot's apartment. Inspector Meadows. A representative of the Morton Hampstead Police who investigates the death of Jonathan Whalley. He is an old friend of Inspector Japp who has recommended Poirot to him. He is willing to have Poirot involved in the case. Flossie Monroe. An old friend of Claude Darrell. She has bleached blonde hair and a preference for Max Factor and monogrammed shirts. Gerald Painter. Nephew and heir to Mr. Painter. He is an artist, described as being wild and extravagant. Dr. Savronov. The world's second-best chess player. Number 4 masquerades as him in London, where he is challenged to a game by an American champion. Mr. Templeton. An older gentleman who fell ill during his meal. The reason of his illness is undetermined. Jonathan Whalley. Another victim of the Big Four. He is murdered in his own residence, Granite Bungalow in the village of Hoppeton, Devon. He had written to John Ingalls, requesting money to escape from the Big Four. Gilmore Wilson. A youthful American chess champion. He challenged Dr. Savronov to a game, and died while playing. Poison is the suspected cause of death. The Big Four was released by HarperCollins as a graphic novel adaptation on December 3, 2007, adapted and illustrated by Alain Paillou. This was translated from the edition first published in France by Emmanuel Proust Editions in 2006, under the title of Les Cotter. The novel was adapted for television with David Suchet as Poirot, as part of the final series of Agatha Christie's Poirot. The film premiered on ITV on October 23, 2013, and in the United States on PBS on July 27, 2014. It also guest-starred Sarah Parrish, Patricia Hodge, Tom Brooke, Nicholas Burns, and Simon Lowe. Suchet's former co-stars, Hugh Fraser, Philip Jackson, and Pauline Moran, reprised their roles as Hastings, Japp, and Miss Lemon. The episode is very loosely based on the novel, considered by writer Mark Gatiss to be an almost unadaptable mess. Did you know? Christie was never truly satisfied with the novel, and considered it among her least favorites, referring to it as that rotten book. Critics were similarly dubious about the new offering, concluding that she was not at her best, especially in light of the previous years, the murder of Roger Ackroyd, certainly a tough act to follow. The book was published a few weeks after the disappearance and reappearance of Christie. The resulting publicity over her name caused the new novel to become a sales hit. Sales were good enough to more than double the success of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. It sold despite not being a traditional murder mystery, being a tale of international intrigue and espionage, and opening the possibility of more spy fiction from Christie. Thank you for watching. See you again next time.